Hey Al, I'm Elio Forcheron,
And I'm Neri Neri.
and today we will be covering the trailer for 6.2 and a sort of analysis theories, just like we did for 6.1.
Yep. Don't expect any accuracy from us, but we'll have some fun.
Our track record on predictions is interesting at best. However, our knowledge and our ability to point things out is of use for maybe formulating your own.
Yeah, yeah. Take our mistakes and build on them.
Well, with that, let's get into it.
There was once light here, and it shone its warmth upon creation. The lands were green and the seas were blue. Life flourished.
In this first little section, we get a voiceover talking about how life once flourished here. The lands were green and the seas were blue. And we'll get pretty explicit confirmation of what they're actually talking about in a little bit here. However, for anyone who knows, well, one, what 6.1 was about, and also the history of the 13th, it's pretty apparent. And that's all juxtaposed to the source and, well, specifically, Island Sanctuary.
Yes, this is explicitly about the 13th. But the island sanctuary looks lovely. Let's start off with that before you get into the deeper lore. But it looks really cute.
Definitely, you gotta love the fat chocobo. Everything about it that we saw in the live letter is looking to be really, really exciting for those people who want slow life
Mhm.
content, especially content that explicitly over and over again repeated by Yoshi P is not going to be tied into any other content. So I saw someone in one of our streams talking about like, oh, what if they tied like Beastmaster to Island Sanctuary? And other than like maybe in a very loose sense, I wouldn't expect anything that is in any way gameplay related to the broader game to come out of Island Sanctuary, other than maybe maybe other than the mounts potentially, and even those were stated by Yoshi P to be pretty easy to acquire. So
Yeah, yeah. As far as I think of the mounts, and maybe this is not the fondest comparison for some people out there, but like the garrison mounts from Warlords of Draenor, they're pretty easy to
right.
get, and they're tied into this little well, not social, but this little player hub, I guess.
Well, I mean, that's the thing that's interesting too, is that it's one, the Island Sanctuary is not only beautiful but huge. Oh my
It is
god, that map!
huge.
It's enormous. And as much as Yoshi P repeatedly stated it's not a replacement for housing, and as much as you aren't allowed to put housing items in it, it is. There's so much going on in it. I will be so interested to see if this actually actively does help with any housing problems. If it gives enough people what they need out of that sort of as somewhere to hang out and to like play stuff and do stuff, that I wonder if we see any drastic or any kind of aid. So the one major lore question I have around Island Sanctuary that has been bothering me for some time is, where do you think it is geographically? Because the two places I've come down to are somewhere in the Rotano or somewhere in the Bounty. And finding out that you have to have 6.0 finished in order to get it makes me think now that it's the Bounty.
It could be the bounty, but it's just giving big Rotano vibes.
It does. I mean, it does look like Hullbreaker Island. A lot of the foliage very much is like that. However, knowing how they reuse assets.
Yeah, well, that's true. But the buildings there, and this is not actually necessarily indicative of anything, but they look almost, more European inspired than perhaps we would see in the Bounty.
Definitely. And I think the thing is that you could think, oh, well, we see what looks like potentially some Charlian mammoths, but one of the things that we're explicitly told about these islands is it does not snow there, and in the Blood Brine it does snow. So like it would be weird. I mean, I guess maybe if they're in like the really, really, really southern part of the Blood Brine Sea it would work, but we know that if you get like over by the far reach, it's like where the Hellsguard Rogadin are, it still like potentially can snow. We know it snows in Charlian. And so like up in the Blood Brine or the Northern Empty would be a little weird.
We saved Charlian's entire society. It's not massively difficult to imagine that they would just give us some mammoths.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my thinking too. Is like literally, even if it's far afield as Thavnair, the idea that they would still be like, oh, we'll send in some aid, or it's like a collective thank you from different people for helping during the final days or something. Totally works.
Yeah. So my bet is Rotano.
My bet was the Rotano, but then the thing that changed me around to thinking more of the bounty was when they specified that it was 6.0 that you had to finish in the live letter. Because before that, I would have thought like, okay, they want it hyper accessible, which means starting cities, right?
I wonder if perhaps it's more sort of the lore around it, which I don't imagine will be hugely deep, but maybe it's more we receive it for our work or something,
Mm-hmm.
something along those lines. The voiceover here is appreciated; it's very cool. But so far, it's not massively revelatory. It's just talking about stuff that we know already happened. The downfall of the 13th and its sort of descent from a natural world into a void.
It's interesting because if you think about it, like our interactions with the void onto things like the world of darkness, Indical High, the role quests in Shadowbringers, we have learned precious little about exactly what happened, other than like a vague sense of basically an antithesis to what happened on the first. Not only just because of light, but also literally like what happened with their warriors of light. But to start to have a lot of this more elucidated, thanks to, I mean, even 6.1, just even finding out that line about 10,000 years from Golbez, right, and
Hmm.
what's going on there, having a much clearer picture of what's going on is fascinating. And maybe hopefully with Troya, I mean, definitely with 6.2, I mean, heck, it's called Buried Memories, right? But with Troya, maybe we're gonna have an even firmer grasp on the days leading up to the actual fall of the 13th, and also maybe even just a little closer picture of some of the metaphysics. We'll get on this later when there's a line that touches to it, but we always understood that the astrality and darkness of the void meant that basically all of the void sent were fighting for Aether, and it seems like some void sent are consuming each other.
Yeah, which isn't massively surprising. We know that conflict exists between the Void Sent, including outright political conflict on the higher tiers. But I would imagine that, in fact, I think it's pretty heavily implied that the rulers of the Void are not infrequently at war with each other.
Yeah, between Skaha, the Cloud of Darkness, and now even Golbez, and I mean Diablos as well. Yeah,
Right, exactly. I mean, Diabolus explicitly betrays his ruler. The I think it's interesting that I've got a lot of theories for Troya, sort of rattling around in the back of my head, including how much it will or will not be based on sort of the content from After Years and After Years. I think is when Troya gets most interesting in the original games it's in.
I hadn't actually played After Years, so that's one of the things I will be excited to get back around to.
Definitely worth playing as well. But I'm really interested in this. I think that for me, I feel like, and this might be arrogance actually, but I feel like I have a strong grasp of what happened in the 13th, even if I wasn't explicitly told it. From what we've got, I feel like it's explanatory of, even if it's not explicit, it's explanatory of the broader strokes of what happened. It's more stuff like in it, exploring the individual stories of characters like Kukulan and stuff like that I might find interesting, I think.
For me, when I say more figuring out sort of the metaphysics stuff, it's less about we don't know any of it. It's more about having a concrete timeline and understanding and specificity, and like you say, of those characters, and especially also like you say, like the warriors of light using the Auracite, and how that exactly go down, and what are the long, do the Auracite still exist? Who's wielding them? Are the entities that are most powerful, like the Cloud of Darkness, like Skaha, were they just powerful people? Were they related to the warriors of light of that time? Is this mysterious figure speaking to us, one of the warriors of light, in the same way that Silva and Anukel High managed to, through the intervention of Elidibus, not fall like the rest of their world did.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be an interesting thing to look into. Like you said, the broader strokes of the metaphysics are perhaps not less interesting. That's not a fair thing to say, but like I said, the personal stories that we're going to find and uncover here, and some questions about, like you said, characters that we've already met, like Gaha, like Diabolos, like the nobility, who are essentially still people. I mean, horribly twisted people, and we don't know how much of their original personalities remain, although they certainly have personalities now. Um, I think exploring that, if we do get to explore that, I don't think we will in this patch, but on a broader scale in the future, as we interact with the Void more often, and possibly redeem it, I think that will be really interesting.
And we've talked at length about the ability for the 13th to potentially be restored, although we know the possibility of reverse umbrality thanks to Eden. The astrality of it, in theory, should be able to be reversed as well. I mean, not without some form of repercussion, but like it's in theory should be possible. And on top of that, being able to treat all of the void sent for once, well, not maybe not all, but especially the higher rung ones that are more sentient, to be able to like have them be more than damn near mustache twirling villains, and to contextualize them, I think it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I don't think that with us redeeming redeeming is perhaps not the best word, but restoring perhaps the 13th, I don't think that amounts to, bringing back its population.
Yeah.
I think that's a bridge that's burned.
Well, if we treat the void sent as parallels to the sin eaters, which in effect they are, it seemed, and also if we look at how what we know about ethereal corruption, right, from the Owen reports, or like what has been taught to us thus far, right? Once your physical form's been messed with, it seems pretty impossible to fix that.
Right.
So while we can maybe fix it and begin to start anew, actually fully reversing those tragedies of the past may be impossible.
I'm assuming that we will find some survivors there, regardless. And perhaps they will be able to resettle the void once we've restored it. Perhaps that'll be where we put the Garlean refugees. Who knows?
Exactly. Well, and now with seeming to have a permanent link to it, there's a lot more opportunities to explore it. Speaking of refugees, people who survive in the void in Troya, shall we get into the next part?
Yeah, let's go.
The lands were green and the seas were blue. Life flourished. This is where I belong. My home. This endless darkness you call the void.
Okay. Fading out
So-
into some sick piano there at the end.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll definitely touch on that. For Fiends music, definitely not relevant whatsoever. But the this endless darkness, this place you call the void, is my home. So I mean, I was watching that live and I was like, oh, this, like it's clear where this is going. I mean, even when it showed Troy, I was like, okay, well, yeah, she's clearly talking about the void.
Yes.
But so we get a shot of Troya, and weirdly enough, I think the most interesting thing about that part is not even the shots of Troya, which is gorgeous and kind of gives me not quite, but definitely a little bit definitely gives me a little bit of a Nightmare of Mensis vibe from Bloodborne.
Okay. Interesting.
Just a little bit, but I mean, like architecturally, if you actually compare them side by side, they're very different. But there's that aspect of the Gothic mixed with reaching and leftover plant life and these long bridges. Like there's even a little bit of almost like the Ring City in it too. I think the most interesting thing though is not in Troya. It's that if you look at the totality of that scene, you see what looks like one of the embryo moons of that we see in the World of Darkness. That's where we fight the Cloud of Darkness. But
yes.
And so you could be like, oh, maybe that's from like the World of Darkness, blah, blah, blah. But if you pay close attention as it's panning, you can see a second one.
Yes. So I wonder if I wonder what these exactly are. Obviously, superficially they resemble Dalamud, which made a lot of sense in the Cloud of Darkness context, of course.
Yeah.
But here it's a little more odd. But I wonder if perhaps they are domains of particularly powerful void sent.
That's definitely my read, is that they are definitely dominions, and they also kind of remind me of the moons that lay in the sky of the first of the three worlds of the final days as well. Not final days, the dead ends as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. When I first saw them, of course, like I said, my thought goes to Dalamud, but I don't know if there's actually much of a link there. I think, well, I suppose it's possible the Alligans, spread their tech around a little bit more in there, but broadly speaking, I think it's probably just a coincidence.
Yeah, I definitely read that either as coincidental or byproduct of some of the Final Fantasy III design, or on top of that, I think the thing is you could pair them in the fact that Dalamud is related to astrality. I mean, like that's definitely tenuous, but it is like a thing.
Okay, yeah, I see that though. Yeah, like you said, Troy is absolutely beautiful. Interestingly, some of the architecture, I know you said reminds you of Mensis and the Nightmare of Mensis. Some of it reminds me of Dravanian architecture.
Oh, interesting.
It's got those weird fluted curved spikes on it
Yep.
that you see in
Yep.
Dravania a lot.
Well, yeah, I'm now just looking at it much closer with that in mind, and I totally can see how those elements and you not only see those architecturally like on the major aspects of it, but you see it even as like I mean not really sconces, but the like on the pedestals all across it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, we have our great mystery, our good friend, our new friend, hopefully friend.
One would hope. I mean, it it'll be interesting because I feel like any friend of the 13th, and save for maybe like Silva and Anukel High, will be
Yeah,
um they may have different allegiances. So for instance, we get Golbez's line in 6.1 that seems like Golbez has been prepping to potentially restore the void for the better part of 10,000 years, and that may come at the cost of the source and everybody else, or something like that.
yeah, I definitely think that at the very least it will be a gray area. His whole deal, how we're sort of interacting with him, will be a morally gray area in parts.
Yeah, and I only bring up Golbez because even though he's more set up to be our specific antagonist, that sort of disposition may be true of our mysterious figure as well.
Yeah. So my thoughts for this mysterious figure are how exactly, how profoundly linked is this to FF4? How linked is this to FF4? What can we surmise from the characters that we meet there? Is this going to be a character that we see in, or at least an illusion? Is it going to be named for? Is she going to be named for a character from four? Is she going to be named for one of the After Years characters who are very, very central to Troya? A lot of them, like Leonora, one of the playable characters of that game, is from Troya, but she looks nothing like this character. I'm really interested to see that. But my theories for her identity beyond that are, scant. We don't have a huge amount to go on, besides the fact that she's obviously a native of the 13th.
At the very least, it's her home.
At the very least, yeah. And I suppose it's. Does she shouldn't have the Galleon eye, does she? She's sort of got that tilted hat, so I don't know if we'd be able to see either way, actually.
No, but as we get to see more about her visually, I think we'll talk in depth. Oh no, we do get to see her, that shot of her here. So actually, since we get to see her visually here, why don't we talk about that? She's got a scythe, which is interesting because we know other reflection. I mean, like Ranjit on the first has a scythe, right? Like it's effectively a different version of the idea of a reaper. We know that jobs are not necessarily just singular to
Right.
reflection and source.
And we know that weapons are not necessarily restricted to a certain class, but the existence of a scythe wielder in the void, I mean.
Well, since we're here, and we'll talk in depth more of this when we get to the section with it. But if we go a little bit forward, what's really interesting is that her scythe seems, as best I can tell, almost identical to the Pact Void Scent of Xenos. And that is fascinating to me because that could be indicative of A, the commonality of that type of scythe and the practice upon the void, or B, maybe potentially that she is the Pact Void Scent and she is a Void Scent, but there's more human. She's able to maintain a more human form because of, I don't know. I couldn't say.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting theory. I think it's possible. I think it's plausible. I think it would be revelatory to find out that Voidsent could take the form. Of course, the Pact Voidsent aren't conventional Voidsent, but
Right.
still, to find out that they could take the form of a mortal.
That I mean, and that's the thing is, I don't think we would find out that that's something that most can do. Really, I think
Right.
that would be much more specific to either Pact Voidsent or her in hyper specific. And maybe only within the 13th. I'm not, and I'm not sold on it. It's hypothesis at best. It's only just that element of that reaping element seems so fascinatingly similar. It also would potentially make sense why the Pact Voidsent may have reached out to Reapers on the Source. The proto Reapers, the proto Garleans on the Source when they did.
Right.
The sort of related kinship between them.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. And I wonder if perhaps the act of making a pact is transformative in that it gives you maybe an element of humanity leaking across from the other side of the pact.
Well, I mean, and think about the element of the void sense and the void that is granted onto a reaper. So like
Yeah.
we know it goes that one way. Why not the other? It also makes sense because you think about one of the main thing that the Voidsent Pact partner for a Reaper is doing is they're consuming the aether of your enemies in order to like that. That's what they're getting out of it too. So you could wonder too if maybe feeding on aether to a certain point allows them to maintain a manifestation of a certain kind, but like rampant consumption can also cause you to be corrupted wildly, right? Because part of the problem is the astrality of the ambient astrality of the 13th, but also part of it is just the lack of ambient aether.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I think beyond that, whoever this is, I think if it is a pact void sent, I think the act of if that's the theory that we're rolling with, the I think that perhaps making the pact resurface some memories, or aspects of the original personality.
Yeah, I definitely like that. And also it could work, I mean, hey, speaking of restoration, it could also work as a prototype for something to do with that because we will see later that we are going to speak or confront the Pact Void Scent of Xenos. And
Yes.
so maybe that is a much earlier scene and this conversation is a later scene.
It's interesting. So this figure, whoever they are, is speaking fondly of, I'm assuming Troya, but perhaps more broadly, the void, either fondly or wistfully, and has either resigned themselves to living here or feels sort of strongly from a philosophical viewpoint that they should live in. I'm looking at this is completely off topic from what I was just saying, but I'm looking at the timestamp at 42 seconds in, and the spire from up close really looks Dravanian.
So the final point I think I want to touch on before we continue forward is I would like to point out it's really interesting within Troya or in the final part of Troya. You can see light shafts breaking from above, which makes sense if you think about it in terms of the world of darkness being a world covered in darkness completely the way that the first would have looked if it had been completely suffused in light, and how a lot of the maps even started to look, the brightness, the bright sky, that special light box. It would make sense if you think about maybe in certain places the darkness is weakened just a little bit, allowing for the actual day sky to break through some. Maybe that's the impression I get with those light shafts.
So I've been considering this since era, but the question of has the void destroyed all the structures on except for the ones that we see, or the vast majority of them, or has it buried them under this fog? And what we're seeing is what was above the fog. Personally, I believe that it's destroyed most of them outright. The sort of the anthropic nature of it has super quickly decayed them or destroyed them in some other way, and that what we see, the structures that we see, are either sustained in a manner by sort of elegant tech, like we see with the Cloud of Darkness ruins, or in the
Mm-hmm.
case of Troya, perhaps are in an area of slightly weakened voidal energy, uh, as the rays of light might explain.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. I'm also looking in the bottom right corner when we see the wide shot of Troya. You can see what looks like crystals of darkness. However, they're out of energy. They're like, so I wonder if that's just supposed to be natural black rock formations, or if there's something more to that.
Yeah, so I've also been looking at those actually. They look almost airy like.
Yeah,
I'm not saying there's anything to be drawn from that, but it's just sort of what came to mind. But yeah, the presence of crystals at all in the void that aren't imported would be a big deal.
yeah. That's why I've always been very interested in the world of darkness. There's crystals of darkness all over that map while you're going around, and I always wondered, is the cloud of darkness storing them for use? Is it an indication of their strength? Is it because they're dark and astral, they're less particularly consumable and usable compared to more elementally other aspects? I'm unsure.
I almost wonder if it's somewhat similar to a calcification of the Allegan. Sort of the Allegans went in there and they tracked a bunch of ether in with them, and they in fact bought reserves of ether in with them. And I almost wonder if that's almost this stuff that they left behind calcifying, for want of a better word, in the voidal energies.
It's a good point. I mean, we know it's the same gate too that Ajdaya went through, so who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
So we get a little sting of the Four Fiends theme, and let's continue on.
Fools. Death doesn't exist in this world.
It's another death they want. I say we give it to them.
Your ether is mine!
So first off, this is Scummiglione, right?
Yeah, well, and you know what? I didn't recognize them at first because I was so used to like the FF4 DS version that's much more zombie. But if you look at the original Amano art, this is very much him based off of the Amano art, the like original FF4 Amano art, the original FF4 Amano art. You can even like he has the sword and everything.
Yeah. So I was looking at this at first. I was thinking that's got to be Scummiglione. Is it Death Gaze? No, it's Scummiglione. Yeah, it is. And Estinian has a fascinating line that I think confirms one of our theories that we mentioned earlier here. He tells Scummiglione, if you want another death, we'll grant it to you. This almost outright confirms to me that Scummiglione was a person of the 13th.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very possible. I mean, you have Scarmiglione saying, "Fool, death doesn't exist here," as he's absorbing the aether of another void scent, which is also super important to say. Like, okay, the void scents are consuming each other's aether because they're all just fighting to survive in a different way. It's basically there's not death; it's just whenever you run out of aether, you're basically done for.
Right.
I think there's another potential read though, which
Okay.
is you fight him as the boss like 3 separate times in the dungeon, or like that you've actually killed him already, or even maybe like you fought him in a trial, or in like as part of like a trial. Imagine like the Four Fiends are one trial, and then you do the dungeon after or something, because then we know that the trial is going to be baked into the MSQ. Well, it's not entirely clear how that's going to play out, but either way, though, I definitely think emphatically your point about him being a person of the 13th is true either way. My question is, was he a warrior of light?
I almost wonder if the elemental nature of the Four Fiends, just Scummiglione is Earth, and sort of representative of the corruption of Earth. I wonder if perhaps that has some bearing on who they were previously. Is
Could
he
be.
perhaps a geomancer in life? I mean, there's any number of links that you could make.
I've got an alternative theory that doesn't really work because there's only 5 figures. But what if he was the bearer of an Earth crystal,
It could
like
be.
the crystal of light that was Earth, in
Yeah,
association with that as well.
yeah, it could be.
I mean, like you'd think that the great sword he bears would mean that his field would probably not necessarily be some. I mean, the Dark Knight is what we have on our world that use the great sword, but we know that there are other like occupations that someone could have with a great sword, especially on a different reflection with a different fundamental, class around it. Maybe like a geomancer class that uses a greatsword.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the greatsword is sort of a fundamental part of his design, right? As chemically on his art and his design in a series of other. I think it's more his design in art and later content than it is actually in his in 4. But it's yeah, that definitely features in the Amano art. His greatsword does, but then again, so does tentacles. So let's take a moment to acknowledge that the music is extremely exciting. I
It
love
is
the
very
4
good.
theme.
FF4 was my first Final Fantasy. I mean, it's not the one that I have the most nostalgia for, but it is up there, and so it was very exciting. Like, to me, almost the Four Fiends is one of the like battle themes that when I hear of, it's like what I think of as like a battle theme for Final Fantasy.
Yeah, definitely. I just realized they said that I don't think he has tentacles in this. I just looked at him. He has extremely prominent
Oh
tentacles.
yeah, tentacles for days. Well, and the cloak, is such a part of the Amano art as well. And when we
Oh
get
yeah.
that,
Well, the cloak is like fundamental Skarmaglia in all of its content, right? Like he,
yeah,
you fight him in the cloak in 4 when he's all sort of shadowy, and then you knock it off and stuff. It looks like he summons succubi.
definitely. Yeah, the fight looks very interesting. I mean, for a dungeon fight.
It does. I sort of don't associate succubi with Skarmaglione, I suppose. Maybe like Hectites or something, but.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting choice too, because it's not like would be specific to them. You think you could get more specific with the Void Scent. However, I will say that in terms of being like quintessential Void Scent, especially when we think about places like Hawk Manor and stuff, I do think it's a good shorthand to be like Void Scent, super Void Scent. This guy controls some Void Scent,
Yeah, that is.
Whereas I can definitely imagine some people seeing some things like Hectize and being like, "Oh, that's monstrous," but I don't think like immediately Void Scent. It doesn't have the same like bat, vampiric, gothic, like elements to it. Now that's just a throwing out why they might have chosen that. It also may be that the attacks they're doing are like they wanted to do something that was more in line with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I think it's wrong. Any sufficiently potent Void Scent probably commands multiple succubi, right? The just by nature of how prominent they're shown in the how prominent they're shown in the context of the void that we see, even so far as having multiple ranks that they span across.
Well, I was about to say that's actually a really good point that you think about the fact that the succubi are a pretty. I mean, they're not a high-ranking Void Scent, but they're a pretty mid-high-ranking Void Scent. So the fact that he's commanding a bunch of them at once is also kind of an indication of power in and of itself. We also see the thing that he's stabbing seems to be like a more powerful or a different kind of succubus. So I wonder if it's also him taking command over some of the Void Scent that were already present there and under that Void Scent's like command, and then by consuming them, he's basically like, nope, this is all mine now.
Right. Well, Skarmaglione's got a whole deal going on, right? Where he is sort of all about poison, and I believe also undeath is mentioned not infrequently around Skarmaglione.
No, definitely some depictions of very like zombie-like as well, rather than demonic.
Yes. Oh, I do remember that in 4 it is mentioned that he only ascends to true power when he dies. So perhaps that is what Estinian's talking about. But yeah, either way, the whatever he's doing with this succubi, I'm sure will be novel and interesting in its own way. I did have another thought just. So Kainazo, obviously, the Archfiend of Water, is in 4. It is actually the first one you meet, but he is in disguise as sort of a knight. And I wonder if perhaps this Reaper figure is Kainazo in disguise. It's possible.
That'd be really cool. Speaking of her, actually, I was going back and looking at the figure that is killed by Skarmaglione, and it is very interesting. Like, it's a much more beautiful, striking figure, and also it like almost armor kind of looks loosely like our mysterious figure's armor, and her face is very pale in a similar way, and her mouth is like she's got this like very similar lip color. She looks the figure looks noticeably similar, and maybe it. I mean, one, and also it's worthwhile pointing out that that's being said about death at the same time that this character is also being killed. So maybe that's. I mean, this also could just be a void scent of Troya. Maybe the our mysterious lady was like this figure, a guard of Troya, but she was one of the only
Yeah.
guards that made it out.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, the model is a really pretty model. Actually, you're right. It's and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that it does call to mind some of the Pack Void Scent designs.
Exactly.
And its armor and sort of the rendering on the uh, skirt, for want of a better word, perhaps.
Yeah, the coattails.
Yeah.
Oh, and also with the Balance Scar Megalon, you can see in the background even more of the sort of Cloud of Darkness orbs. So
Yes,
it's definitely clear that there's many of them.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's maybe four for one for each Archfiend.
Oh, that's an interesting thing. I was thinking of them much more as it's just like an ambient background element that exists for like just some powerful void scent. But like, yeah, that would make sense. Although you think about how Golbez seems to also be residing in one potentially, based on it looking somewhat similar in design. Like the fear of energy around his throne seems somewhat similar in design. So yeah, that definitely could be.
Yeah, I think it's plausible. I don't think we know enough to like 100% surmise, but yeah, definitely. I looking at Scamiglione's sword, obviously so much. It looks like a lot of love has been poured into its design.
Oh yeah.
So I definitely wonder if we're going to see maybe the four Archfiends in an Echo flashback or something as people. We're going to see the sword on his back, stuff like that.
Well, I'm definitely hoping that we're going to see that. I mean, like the choice to name the freaking story Buried Memories, and I know I keep going on about that, but not only do I go on about that because A, they chose the name, but B, Yoshi P was very pointed about that name being very specific, and also it being a reference to both Pandemonium and the MSQ. So I think we're definitely going to get a lot more about the history of these characters as we go along, and I'm definitely as much as I think the Echo Visions could be a crutch, I think at this point they're actually just a much more useful tool for contextualization of the past without just using straight exposition.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Something I did notice, if you look at 102, the ends of Scamiglione's tendrils are hollow. They're like,
Yes, I was thinking of Cell from Dragon Ball Z.
yeah,
Sadly,
yeah, that's the kind of vibe. So I wonder if perhaps that's how he sucks your Aether out.
I mean, because he's able to stab and absorb into his hand as that cutscene goes on. And what it could just be a design element, but it would definitely be cool if that maybe it has to do with an attack too.
Right, yeah.
Well, shall we continue on? Okay, are you ready to talk about ass? Because I'm very excited to talk about ass.
I am definitely ready to talk about everything.
Yes, so Sylvie Subterrane. Finally, Niniri, we're getting our that lore, that good lore about Sylvie, and it is very exciting.
We certainly are. Interesting as well. So looking at the subterranean stuff, right, it almost looks cobbled together. These sort of windows, turrets perhaps, poking out of the rock, and the palisade gates and all of that. I mean, obviously, whatever is left of Sylvie will have been beaten up by time and by conflict and by a literal flood of undead. But I almost wonder if perhaps there were survivors of Sylvie, or if there were even a beast tribe living under here or something, because that just doesn't ring true of Sylvie to me.
It's very interesting. Yeah, so my read on the 3 passages too is based on what we see here and what the bit we got from Yoshi P during the live letter is that the 3 passages that we get are kind of varying levels of elevation. So you've got Sylvie that's closer to the sky, Sylvie that's in the center, maybe going more properly through the ruins, and then going through the far below, because you have it seems like almost like mines.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, the architecture is going to be very interesting to go through because you have a couple things going on, right? Which is that the Sildine architecture in theory should be remotely, to some extent, equatable to aspects of Karn and Ul'dan architecture. Like
Yeah.
not like straight up, not necessarily the Egyptian vibes, and not necessarily like it has to be like Ul'dah, but it literally founded at the same time, both coming out of Belladia.
Yeah.
It's also hard to tell because we saw so little both during the I mean, despite seeing quite a bit, we saw so little, relatively speaking. I mean, we only get we only get to see Silky here, right? In terms of
Yes.
bosses, and we know that there should be at least 6 bosses.
Yeah.
So I think we also got to see part of another boss in the live letter that kind of almost, it looked like a Hecaton Kyrie, but it was a little bit different.
Well, right. That's the thing, right? The Hecaton carries have no reason to be down here unless they've broken out, of course, of Copper Belt and into the tunnels, which is entirely feasible. That's not a huge leap.
Yeah, it definitely would make sense. I mean, you think about geographically, Copperbell's location to where Sildee is such that like that is actually I would argue pretty reasonable, even like not. But I mean, like it could be that direction, could be where it went. The other way is that the Hecaton Kyries could have the Sildeen could have had like a deal with Hecaton Kyries, and some of them got trapped down there, and the irony of history playing out in Copperbell.
I also wonder if perhaps it's just a like the augmented Cyclops that we see in Hydaelyn Hard, that have been built
Yeah.
up upon, so almost cybernetically, which probably isn't the right term. But speaking of Hydaelyn, some of the architecture in the subterranean, in the underground section that I was just talking about, kind of looks a little bit Hydaelyn-like. Perhaps primordial Lalafellon, immediately post Marquis Lalafellon.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing though too, is like other than specifically like Karn, a lot of the Dunes folk architecture is going to share. It seems to share similar stylings all around. So that's
Which makes
no
sense.
shocker there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Silky is adorable.
Silky is adorable.
My personal preferred theory on what it is a pet of Nanamo that escaped because it's got a little crown.
So I have a few theories. It's either a pet of Nanamo, it's a pet of a Sildian ruler that's escaped
that works
and grown.
too. Yeah.
It's Nanamo polymorphed.
I would have to go back and look at the also at the live letter to see if you can see Nanamo in it, but that would be hysterical. Like if there was like something like not necessarily the Trader's Spurn, but something like it.
Right. It looks like and don't crucify me here. It looks like Nanamo's persona, right?
Yes, you know what? Look, I can't crucify you because you're not wrong. The only two problems is that like its name in Japanese was like Shirkyu or Shikiru or like Silky basically. And when I was looking at it in the live letter, and the other issue is, well, okay, how do I put this in a PC way? It might be somewhat problematic, seeing as it's a mount, if they let us ride Nanamo.
Well, yes, but what if we it could just be a recreation. I don't know. I'm grasping that, but
You're
either
trying,
way,
Neri. You're trying. But
I'm trying.
look, the imagery of Silky being her persona will not be lost from this. That's the important thing.
Either way, it's obviously got allusions to the Belladine, Ul'dan, Sildian royal sort of vibes, the aesthetics, the headdress on it calls back to this imagery that we see in the ruins, that we see in Nanamo's own raiments, that we see in stuff like that.
I'm very excited to delve deeper into the Sildian. I'm like excited to both delve into the variant dungeon and the Criterion aspect of it, because literally every little detail is phenomenal. And this is not in the trailer, but I do want to talk about the way that they have the variant dungeons and Criterion dungeon system set up. It seems pretty great. On one hand, it seems really great in that like it has its own UI. It's really well constructed. It's set up to like let you know if you're missing any aspects of the lore, if like you haven't experienced one of the parts of the route. I think it's brilliant in all those ways. I think it's great that there's a type of savage dungeon content that I feel like is constructed the right way for 14 that won't become toxic in the way that like Mythic has, and not to like cast aspersions, but just to say like if you make systems, again, this is not aimed towards any one game, but if you make systems that promote disunity or issues or punish players for like the key system, right, in Mythic Plus and stuff.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, This seems very tailor-made to 14 and its community and its sensibilities. My one thing, though, is that it is yet another menu added to a long list of different menus, and I'm starting to worry about menu bloat, and I mean, not starting to, but about for like new players and stuff.
Give me the menus. Well, hopefully the menu won't be immediately available, right? I'm assuming that these variant dungeons aren't available from the jump. Do we know what level they're available from?
Don't know for sure, though. The fact that Ass and Ass Savage are what they are, I would have to assume they can't be available to 90 because of the narrative being the way it is. I would assume that these are available post 6.0. And also, we know that you don't first engage with them from a menu. You engage with them by going, like, talking to Nanamo or something, like going on a quest and unlocking them
Right.
and then do it.
So by the time you get to them, you're probably somewhat experienced in
That's a fair point.
in the other menus. You've probably got the sort of headspace to look at them. I'm really excited for them. I think this is a really exciting kind of lore that they can provide to us. Obviously, that's what I'm getting from it. But there's other stuff to be excited about. New content's always fun. Even if I probably won't do the Savage version, I might play around with it actually. But even if that's probably not going to be my first priority, I'm glad people are getting to enjoy that.
Well, it could be a very fun like tea run, right? Like imagine like the Eorzean archives do it, like
Yeah,
because there's
could
only
do.
4 of us, so we don't. I'll definitely make sure that I'll run them at the very least and have notes and recordings and footage for you at the very least.
Right. Yeah, I'll definitely do my research either way.
I mean, we record an entire one of these just for the Sylvie's Subterranean and stuff. So we're very very clearly excited. Can talk ad nauseum about it. However, I will say what is also exciting is the Steps of Faith. But now it's no longer a trial; it's a story quest.
Yes. Yeah.
Looks phenomenal.
Yeah. So Steps of Faith is controversial, right? As currently is in the game. So I'm glad to see that they're changing that up because it is a little bit of a pain in the ass.
But like the idea, the grandiosity of it, the heart
Yeah,
is in the
yeah,
right
yeah.
place, but the execution just isn't there. But there's there's actually a lot of things I want to talk about this, which is one, they changed the dragon completely, which makes me wonder that dragon is in E1 with a picture, I believe.
Yes, the dragon exists in lore.
Right. And I mean, I assume it's just the same dragon, it's just a new design. I wonder if in the reprints of Encyclopedia Eorzean Volume 1 that they will change the image.
I wonder if that would be a bit of a shame. I wonder if perhaps they add this new image, but they recontextualize the old one as it was, killed by Ishgardian cannons or airships or something like that in the same battle, perhaps approaching. Because that there is some ceremony made in E1 about its size and how prodigious it is.
Right. That's the thing is that it's supposed to be almost singular because of that size, right? Whereas with this
Right.
dragon is also that size, so
Well, is it? I think it's smaller.
you may be right. I mean, like I think it's actually just different proportionalization because like its wing
Yeah.
spread is definitely as big or bigger.
And it's more wyvern shaped. It's more worm shaped than it is typical dragon. Classic dragon. Vaishap is the standard dragon model with some frills added, blown up.
Yeah.
This is a unique model.
And I'm not gonna lie, sincerely, the thing that got me the most excited about this was seeing Passage of Arms and the fact that the game is teaching you stand behind fucking Passage of Arms as a paladin. The amount of people who just run out like, no, stand the cone. God damn it.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
The game is teaching you to like, hey, use it. It's great. I want more things. Have MSQ story characters use abilities that are from a job that are pointedly helpful for teaching, like maybe like things with like scholar or ass or sage or like it doesn't matter what it is, but just yes, that sort of thing, please.
And I think for the last 2 expansions they've been increasingly good at that.
Oh yeah, this feels like they're retroactively trying to. I mean, that's the thing is that all the redo of the dungeons all feel like they are either tweaking dungeons to bring them in line with, especially the AR ones to bring them in line with present ones. Some of the ones that were egregious, but also it feels like trying to treat holistically and unify, all the symbols and stuff. So like you're learning tank buster symbols in Copperbell now, rather than the first time you're learning them is somewhere in like Heaven's Word if you didn't do Binding Coil. The other interesting aspect of this is we can see a bunch of scions. We can see, I believe, Papalimo. We can see Yida.
Papalima.
Well, we're getting more Papalimo. I mean, like, you
Yeah,
know, like
it's
more time
true.
to shine.
We see Lucia, of course, unsurprisingly.
Of course.
We see Lucia as is actually in the game currently, so it's not surprising that we see her. Well, I mean, even more broadly, we see that you can have Hoshafant in the vault later. Yeah, which I've wanted since I first ran the vault.
Yeah. Yes. We will talk about that in just a little bit here. Shall we move on to bunny butts?
Yes.
I, the crystal, which showed the way to Meteon. And who better to bear Hydaelyn's gift?
That image of the dance, the little opera dance, is so cute.
It's so fucking cute. I also can't not just die laughing with a bunch of Loporrits sticking their asses in my face.
Twerking.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so cute to see the Loporrit with all the sort of celestial light reflected in his eyes there. That's really nice graphical attention.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk about that. Yeah, no, like I'm so excited to talk about this for so many reasons. But we know this is the Omicron.
Yes, this is the Beast
tribe quests.
And tribe quest.
It looks stunning, but if you look at the sky and you look at that field, what I think this is the third world of the Dead Ends, the one with Rala. And I think what this story is going to be is about trying to restore life to some of the Dead Ends and to try and because we also know that it's rooted in the necropolis and with a bunch of people who are standing around there and like conversing.
I wonder if life isn't perhaps the right terminology. I wonder if perhaps providing the fragments of people that are left there a kind of, elevating it from a purgatory for them to almost a life, but not life for them. That's how I first see
Absolutely. No, and I wouldn't. I should have been even more careful with my words. I totally agree. It's not about we're gonna make these things these perfect things. We're gonna bring it back, restore everything. But it's just more about taking these places of despair and instead granting them just a little bit of hope, making them a little bit more. But it's the other. But I mean, I say that too, and I think that's what that shot looks a lot like. However, if you go forward and you see the little jelly guys, which look much more Aya. Yeah, they're so cute. And did you see the mount for them from the live letter?
Yeah, so cute.
It's so good. This has the same Starry Night Sky.
Yes.
So this becomes a little more interesting. So is this the Aya's world from within the Dead Ends instead? Because we only see a fraction of a shard of it within the outer parts of Ultima Thule. Because I'm not sure where this is supposed to be. Because you see that giant blue orb in the sky. It's clearly not.
Here's what I suspect is that with Meteon dead ish and all of the energy that she kept with it, we know that energy in this setting isn't created or destroyed necessarily. I wonder if perhaps it's almost like a big bang out in space, if what we're seeing is the universe beginning to reform around the Dead Ends.
Interesting. That's a fascinating idea. I kind of like it. Yeah, my thought had been much more that it would be us maybe using Dynamis or going with the ambient Dynamis of the world affecting a new region, because we know that it's the every time there's a tribe sense. I mean, it's like one of the tribes is really the Exalt only in AR, but since Heaven's Word, there's always been at least a tribe really that has affected the world state. And I guess all of them in Heaven's Word do affect the world state. So I wonder if this is very much a I'm forgetting what it's called, but in Ilmeg, the pixie, the realm of the pixies. You know what I'm talking about, though.
Like an internal world type vibe.
Yeah, the Candyland thing. So I'm thinking, what if this is a very similar thing? This is the place we can like physically go and continue to like bring back to life.
I think that sort of an instanced area would be believable, definitely. I think that's possible. I also think they have space, to sort of just play around with the Dead Ends as much as they want. It's such an ill-defined, and that's not in a negative sense, but
no,
such a sort of nebulously defined area that they could do, and it also doesn't necessarily obey the laws of physics as we understand them in the universe, so that's helpful.
I mean, because one, you have the laws of physics in terms of 14. You have the fact that it's all made of Dynamis. You also have the fact that we don't know how many worlds exist in it. And we also have the fact that not only is all of that true, but because it's concentrated dynamis rather than aether, it gets wibbly wobbly on top of being wiggly woggly.
Yeah, exactly. Dynamis sort of does whatever it wants to currently, I suppose, or whatever the writers want it to currently, I suppose.
I feel it's a little more defined than that, but you're not entirely
Well, you know what?
wrong.
They can do whatever they want.
Yeah. Yeah. I only mean to go to bat to them for I think they've been relatively responsible with
Yeah.
not just using as an out.
No, I agree.
That's fair. We have Ysael fighting in the
Yes.
beginning of
Somall. Yeah, we do. So it would be it's the crew, right? One of my favorite groups. It would be Alphinaud, Ysael, Estinian.
yeah, and you can see Carbuncle in there. So I think
Yeah.
definitely I'm hoping they're letting us use that crew because that was the pitch I kept giving people while we were prepping for the live letter. I'm like, well, I mean, like that's the obvious choice, right? And the thing is, my point I also made is they were like, well, what would you be able to have a party no matter what? Well, if you make Alphino healer DPS because you know he's pseudo arcanists. You make Estinian DPS, and then you make Ysael able to do pull a Graha and be tank DPS or healer because I mean think about her forms as Shiva, right? She's got a staff healing form. She's got a staff healing form you can do.
Okay.
You've got a bow DPS form, which obviously they're not doing a bow DPS form. Seems like she's the thaumaturge here. And then you also could have her. She has a sword form, so you could have her be like have a Dark Knight tank form if they wanted to have it work that way.
Well, in terms of physicality for Ysael, it's worth noting that before she became Shiva, she was she lived amongst the trappers, right?
Right.
So she's lived that physical wild life. You know, she's not some sheltered mage. She could probably do this stuff.
She ain't no Nymean Lily.
Right, exactly. So, and even if not, they can slot in the generic Grand Company NPCs, you know, around these if need be. You know, if your party composition is just so that it doesn't work out and that's what it is, then you can always just slot in one of those maybe.
Yeah. I think what we see elsewhere definitely suggests that that's what happens. I just wish there was an optimal I would just hope that there was a way to try and make it work with as many combos as possible.
There will be, for sure. I mean, people are still people are still out there making content about that trio. Yeah, people love that friendship dynamic. And I think it's one of the great personal threads of Heaven's Ward. It's what makes Ysael and Estinian so, and Alphinaud to a degree, although he has a lot else going on in that expansion. Makes him so compelling.
Absolutely. Well, and I think they're what makes Heavenward itself compelling because not only does it serve to be human and to have wonderful character dynamics, but on top of that, you have this beautiful juxtaposition of different sides that aren't just the antagonist. Like, don't get me wrong, Emmett Selk and us in Shadowbringers is phenomenal. But here you don't have, it's not the two sides. It is two sides, but it is not the two sides.
Right.
And so being able to have that juxtaposition of Ysael's philosophy and experience and desires versus Estinian's, and to have them be nuanced enough that you have Estinian see the churning mist, and he's like, I still have my responsibilities, but I cannot deny what I can't pretend like I don't see what my eyes see, right? Like that,
right.
I see that the truth of human and dragon was once peace. It wasn't always this way.
Right, exactly. And so I think we discussed this when we first saw it, but with this expanded trust system, for want of a better, you know, in finger brackets, because they're not calling it trust, are they? In
the duty support system.
When I first saw it, and they were showing us, you know, just the pictures of the Grand Company generics, and I was like, okay, it's not what I dreamed of, but it's what I expected. And now they're showing us that at least a few of these dungeons will have these characters, will have this extra flavor added into it. And I love that. I'm absolutely in love with that.
Yeah, it's a major boon, right? Like that's the thing is, it's also hard to fully explain why that level of flavor is actually kind of really important. But I do think it is, and I'm really, I think it bodes well for the long-term health of the game.
Well, I also think it takes 14 from what was shaping up to be with this system a good single-player game to being an excellent single-player game in how it can deliver its narrative through dungeons still with these addition of characters.
Yeah, fully agreed. So, bunch of Mandervilles up on the moon.
Sexy Mandervilles, yeah.
It's wild. That's all I'll say.
It's always wild with him.
The bunnies seem to be performing a
Cabaret, let's say.
yeah, with a giant stage on Mare Lamentorum. I'm assuming that has to do with Manderville. I don't know what else would be that wild.
I almost wonder if this is something that they like an like a entertainment that they've planned for the people of the source, that they will then be rolling out to entertain the people of Oh, it's on Mario. Okay, my theory is going to be that they're going to use it to entertain the like the lost souls of Ultima Thule, but no, it is
Would
on
be
Mario
amazing.
Lamentorum. Yeah.
I will say, the idea that this is part of MSQ and you arrive on Mare and they're like they're like practicing this performance to like cheer people up or something would not be unfounded and would be pretty hysterical.
Imagine the Gallian refugees and Gaius is just watching this.
That's exactly what I was thinking about. And also, we think about in End Talkers, which you haven't listened to, you should go check out our podcast, End Talkers. We talk about how there's the accordion structure of like tension and release. You could also imagine with like, I think 6.2 with not even just Pandemonium, but with all the stuff going on in the Void, having some moments of levity could be helpful.
And the Loporrits are great for that.
Yeah, they
certainly
sure are. Yeah, my safe hypothesis is definitely that it is Manderville, though.
Yeah, it could be Manderville. God, the Loporrits are going to be turning up in everything then.
Yeah, look, I'll take it.
I'll take it.
I, the crystal, which showed the way to Meteon. And who better to bear Hydaelyn's gift than her chosen champion?
Last we get Y'shtola talking to us while holding the crystal that Hydaelyn gave us that led the way to Meteon, and referencing, well, seeming clear that she's going to use it for something. And my question is she using it for the Atmos? Like, that clearly is MSQ. And so some part of that is going to be a part of making the way to 13th. Maybe what it is the tracking data for Meteon was put into it. And she's saying that who better to wield it than us if we're the one who's going to go into the 13th first, which we go into the 13th clearly. It's not clear I guess the others do follow us behind because we see them in Troy at some point.
Yeah.
But maybe this is a way to like have a tracking. Oh, you know what it might partially be? It might be that it's dangerous, so it's safe for us to go in, and because of that, we then have a way to create a more permanent tracking point from the other side. Because they talk in 6.1 a lot about like having something to some kind of beacon to be able to pull oneself through, the same way that Graha needed something for us in 5.0.
Right. So I think this is the last vestige essentially of the Mother Crystal, right? So I think there's a lot to explore about what exactly Hydaelyn's essence means for the worlds of our star. It is almost a primordial aspect of them. I wonder if it's almost like a terraforming seed.
Ooh, that's a fascinating take.
I wonder if, because obviously, a foundational part of the creation of the shards was her, was Vanar / Hydaelyn shattering them. So I wonder if perhaps this is, that's what we're seeing. That's what we could see from this crystal. And
her power was stasis. It was umbrality. It was light. And so of all the things to, combat the astrality and darkness of the 13th. I mean, there's an interesting thought there. I mean, it the scale and scope of that crystal to me is so limited in form. I have to wonder how much it would help. But at the same time, I think that your fundamental idea there is definitely interesting. We also know that the ethereal seas can be connected because we know Hydaelyn was able to pull the souls from the first's ethereal sea.
Yes.
So maybe we could also, there's something with that as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to think about this crystal, and I think it's interesting that Y'shtola has it.
My wonder is like, how did Y'shtola? Is it like we like leave it behind after? Did we just like leave it somewhere?
Well, I guess we pass out, right? Like we wake up with them on the ship, like they've carried us onto the ship, right?
That's true. I mean, arguably, also we could have just handed it to her too.
That phrasing, the phrasing of the line seems weird. I think she just pilfered it on the way out of Ultima Thule.
I think you might be right, because the phrasing of the line does seem weird. She's like handing it over, and then yes, the crystal, perfect for you, hands it back.
Yeah, right. Although it's possible.
But, yeah.
I mean, Y'shtola's a weird girl.
Well, but you know what the other thing too is that there's like, we're talking specifically about the dialogue, but we've seen other examples of the dialogue that they're speaking is actually not from the scene that we're speaking in. Now we see
Right.
lip flaps matching relatively, so it seems probably it's in line. Shall we continue on?
I am here. Finally here. And I will find you, sister.
Okay, so first off, I want to actually go on to it second because it's going to be relevant in a second. But Vritra, I love Vritra, and it hurts. It hurts that he's suffering so. But also, speaking of dragons, the vault looks awesome.
Vault looks really cool. I'm interested. So it looks like our party composition is we've got a paladin tank, warrior of light, right? We've
Yep.
got Harshafan, which is interesting that he's not restricted to the tank role. I wonder if he can just be sort of like a DPS gladiator vibe type thing.
Yeah. It would make sense to have him be a flex because we've then got Alfino as the healer and the random Lancer as the DPS.
Well, I'm actually quite glad to see the Lancer, right? So on a few levels. Number one, it enhances the flavor of the schism within the Temple Knights that Emmerich and Lucy already gave us a bit of, and sort of some of the other NPCs around. And also the fact that it's not just always like the grand companies. The generics can shift in their appearance depending on the context.
Yeah, there's a balance to be struck. We can clearly, well, I'm not clearly, but you can see oh my god, keep saying Fortunal instead of Horshafont. You can clearly see Horshafont has his shield on his back. So
Yes.
I definitely think that it's the case.
Well,
I also don't.
He
I
needs
think
to
the
have it
game,
on him.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think part of it is they're showing Paladin Warrior of Light because it's 6.0 trailer. However, if you were playing canonically, you'd be a Dragoon right here. So like he
Right.
probably would be your tank.
But he is fighting with his shield as a DPS alongside you as a tank in that fight. So
Yeah.
that's fine. I have obviously that's not an issue. I can suspend my disbelief there.
Well, more than just being fine, I actually really like it because I'm really a big fan of having other characters play not just as it's just a paladin or it's just like him being if you look at his class and it has his job and it's just basically labeled knight, and so like as a combination of like gladiator abilities, paladin ability, like it's the same way that when you play as Y'shtola or Alfino in the MSQ, you have like very different abilities. Like they're kind of the same, but it's like a different setup.
Right. I mean,
Y'shtola is a sorceress,
Yeah, Istola is sort of a gestalt of conjure abilities, and then some of the magic that she was able to pilfer from the Sharlayan sort of repositories, and Matoya's own sort of crazy stuff, and then of course the Raktika spellcasting that she seems to have picked up as well. So like the classes are scalable. Ishgard specifically, we see people who are functionally white mages in their abilities in the Heaven's Ward, like the organization Heaven's Ward, but of course are not lore-wise white mages, at least from the same legacy. We see warriors who are able to use the same sort of berserking abilities, but again are not in fact of the same lineage as the warriors that we play. So like we often discuss with Conjury, they share similarities and perhaps at their core are a singular truth or a collective truth, but they aren't actually all, there are different cultural strands that lead to this same or similar identity.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is that it's really important to understand that the only way to fight with a shield is not to be a paladin in lore in universe. The only way to cast white magic spells is not to be a white mage. Like the world's more complicated and nuanced than that, but it can seem restricted down to that because of there has to be a mechanical simplicity at some level.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, paladins seem to have been independently invented in Ishgard quite early on in their story.
Right. Well, and also I would love it if they were called knights in English. The reason being, like their job class would be called knight, is because in Japanese, paladin is called knight. So then what you could do in Japanese is instead you could have the Ishgardian knight called paladin.
I mean, it makes sense, right? The Arthurian legend, that's where paladins are from, so it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, yeah, like you could just slap any name on it you want, really, right?
Yeah. So we then see more of the world of darkness, and we see some buildings and a lot of ruins and wreckage floating in the sky. as well as the I'm forgetting what their names are, but we see a
Ariak
lot of
or
these.
something. Yeah.
Yeah,
So they're troop carriers essentially for the Voidsent armies. They swallow Voidsent and then spit them out.
and we also see some statues of we see a statue of what looks like a paladin using passage of arms, a paladin of the 13th, whatever they would have been called.
A warrior of light, probably something of that ilk, which provides some context for what perhaps Troya was. If it was a bastion of these defenders, if it was, the headquarters of these valiant warriors, because God knows they were successful, too successful.
Do you read this as being in and around Troya? Because I actually read this as being somewhat removed from it.
I think at the very least there is a lore connection. It doesn't need to be the same location, perhaps, but I don't think this exists without them being some lore connection to Troya.
Interesting.
I don't think we have scope for two entirely unrelated locations in the void in this patch.
I would, if we went off of history, I think you're correct. I don't know why my gut says that. I feel like they're more disconnected from each other than that. But I think if we go off of like everything we know about dev cycles and them in general, I think you're definitely right.
So what's interesting is that I could link some of these structures to marquee architecture in a very vague sense, which is interesting because that it would make sense that they would perhaps draw some inspiration from the void, from structures they might have glimpsed through some mechanism or communication in the void in their own construction.
It's definitely more Dunscape than anything,
Right.
I definitely see. Well, no. Now that I think about it, I think about the Maki architecture you get in the Weeping City, and you're right. It is that same very square, very brick, very
Right. Exactly. They got the square brick, and then they've got the sort of crenellated, almost not fences, but these sort of spiky tops that some of the stuff. Obviously, the stuff we see in the Weeping City, in terms of the non-pyramid buildings, are supposed to be very worn down by the rain and stuff. So it's it's hard to tell beyond that, but I mean, I think it applies to both, because Dunscape was almost, I suppose, considered an idealized version of a marquee residence.
I think another interesting thing to wonder about that is that a byproduct of the void sense affecting these places no, because these would have been built before the void sense. Well, I guess these could have been, this was built this way and then the void sense brought that idea over to the Maki. Or
Right.
Alternatively, is that more just a design element choice to connect those two that aren't actually, it's not actually connected in lore. It's more just connected in that if you subconsciously you might like not realize that those two are similar, but you have a similar vibe.
I think that's possible, but I think it's more interesting if it's the other way.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true.
And we see more of these depleted crystals, right? Or perhaps they're not even depleted crystals. Perhaps this is just what crystals sometimes look like in the void,
I'm starting to think it is the earth structure, though, because you see so much of that as the underlying structure of a lot of these places, and yet it's also a strange, twisted form of so much. It's very interesting. Again, and the other thing that throws me off so much is those crystals of darkness in the World of Darkness raid.
Right. Yeah. I think this paladin is fascinating. It's so much more human than we've been allowed to see. And I don't mean racially. I mean thematically, than we've been allowed to see of the void previously.
So yeah, to wrap that part up, we have Ritra basically talking about he's going to fight to see to save Azjaya.
Yes.
And that's very exciting. Also, probably not going to turn out well. I love that he's committed, right? Like, however it turns out, he has to see it through.
It makes sense, right? For Ritra, this is, perhaps his responsibilities have been holding him back from this, but this has always been what he's wanted.
Yeah, I mean, he had to forego hope.
Yeah, and we finally pushed him onto it. A lot of characters are very reluctant to actually do what they need to do for themselves in this story. So, as usual, we've sort of shoved him onto the road of righteous selfishness.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, I don't mean that in a maladaptive way. I mean it in
no. I think the narrative definitely agrees with you, though. Like, I mean, that's like the whole point of the Radiant host, right? Like that. I think that's very much. I do not think the game treats the idea of righteous, well-intentioned, righteous. selfishness isn't even quite the right word, but like one's own path rather than the path for everyone else at times is not the wrong choice.
Yeah, I mean, selfishness was something that I wrote about in my master's dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
And we in psychology we consider selfishness along the lines of that there's maladaptive selfishness, which is finger brackets bad, and then prosocial selfishness, which is we everyone is selfish, but just because something benefits yourself doesn't mean it's a bad or wrong thing to do in any way.
No, finding the intersection is the
Right.
interesting and important part.
Right, and we can be pretty confident that Vitro is being he's a wholesome boy.
Oh, very much so. I mean, like he put everyone else ahead of him for thousands of years. If he's not, then fucking none of us are. Shall we move on to the next part?
Yeah, let's go.
You're not the only ones who can ride the wind. Then go and impress upon these interlopers the futility of defiance.
Okay, there's a bit to talk about. With the next two sections, let's just say. Shall we? I'm just gonna go chronologically because there's just too much to say about all of this. Which is, first off, we get to see our mysterious lady fighting other void scents, and you can see that she is surrounded by our fellow scions. You can see Estinian, and importantly, and this is one of the things I'm very excited for, and we see this throughout, is it looks like Varshan is one of the trust companions for Troya.
Yeah. In fact, at the end of that, we see them fighting Scamiglione again. If you really get in on the frames, you can see them fighting.
Oh yeah, that totally is him. Oh my god, it's like literally there for like a second.
Yeah, very brief. The other ones are models of Void Tent that we've seen before, so nothing hugely special, but at least in the enemy choices.
I think that goes along with the idea that we kill him once and then he comes back and like fooled why like he's saying like death is not.
So something that's really interesting is if you take a look at 211 and look behind our Reaper friend, there is a crystal of darkness on the floor.
Yes, I noticed that.
Now that's interesting. It could link this character back to the Ascians. Could do, or it could just be a crystal of the Warriors of Light of the shard that has been corrupted. It could be maybe even an Auracite.
Ooh, those are all really interesting ideas. The elongated nature of them makes them very interesting. That would make sense if they're Auracite or something, or can contain void scent or creatures, or allow for something of them.
I would be very surprised if an Auracite couldn't contain a void scent.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point. All three void scents at the very least are palette swapped, if not pretty new. Now, seeing as we're going into the void, we're definitely going to see a lot of new void scent like models. So that's just gonna.
I think those models might have appeared in Eureka. We have a lot of void scent that we haven't seen a great deal of since that we meet in Eureka, especially unique boss models and stuff like that. So it would be a great time for them to reuse that, and we will. Yeah, we've already seen unique models like the packed void scent succubus thing that Scamiglione kills.
Yeah. Which, speaking of, let's continue on because there's some more stuff on that I want to talk about. But we have Estinian being fucking awesome. I love Estinian. The thing that I love is that Estinian is edgy badass, like when he first arrives, and that's great and stuff. But like the fact that his character is so wonderful and his journey is so wonderful that now when he gets to be a badass, it's not just like, oh, cool, badass moment. It's this wonderful character is about to do something really cool, and I care so much for them. Fucking slay Estinian.
Yeah, so looking at the screen is really interesting, right? So we've got Estinian who is being really badass. The whole ride the winds thing's awesome. So we can see that our trust party here is going to be Varshan, and I'm sure that there are other options, but Varshan, us, Ishtola, Estinian, right?
Yeah, but we can also see our mysterious figure sitting upon it too.
We're going up against some Arioks, which are again the troop carriers, and some Nats, which are like the lowest ranked void scent. So I can't imagine they're going to present much problem. Something in the foreground that's really interesting is we see a little building on one of the rocks, just a tiny little hut of stone. I say tiny; it's probably not that small, but a single hut of stone that we're going towards.
It looks a lot like the place in which the void scent returns to. I mean, like from this distance, it looks
Yeah.
more poly, so it's like doesn't have the same ruined aesthetic, but it
Mhm.
definitely is that same vibe.
Yeah, and what are we riding on? do we see?
We're riding on an Ariak. I have no like. I
Yeah.
think that's a
But
like
that's
it looks
interesting. How do we get
just like it.
How do we get an Oriok? I mean, you know what? The Void Scent are not impossible to command. You know, Shola
Well, I gotta.
probably can command them. I'm not sure she should.
I feel like the story is going to be playing a little bit with that. Some of those expressions and reactions Yustola gave during 6.1, I wasn't quite clear if 6.1 was playing them for laughs or a little bit, just like a little bit like Yustola might be willing to push things a little too far. Also, our mysterious figure, assuming they have been residing here all this time, you have to assume to some extent they know how to control some void scent.
It's possible. I mean, as a Reaper, it's possible. I also like that in this render, because it's not quite finished yet, our mysterious friend is floating off to the side
Yep.
of the Oriok's head.
Yeah.
They're not actually on.
I honestly bet you I wouldn't be surprised to see the final version of that also is like that, because there's a lot of stuff like that if you watch all the cutscenes in the game pretty close.
It's just part of game dev.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the thing is like, why spend the time to make them sit perfectly for 12 frames when no one but us is going to notice?
Right, exactly.
I mean, I can tell you, like, there are going to be shots in some videos I make that are literally a second long, but it took me 10 to 15 minutes to get that shot. Whereas there might be shots that are like 5 minutes long that just took me 5 minutes to get. You know, so it's like
Right.
Length of time is not proportionate to amount of work. But there's another interesting factoid, which is Varshan has a shield here, but in the very next shot has a spear. So I think Varshan's
I
gonna
was
be able
just
to.
about to mention his fucking cool glaive.
Yeah.
Yeah, his glaive's awesome. The shield's cool as well. But the glaive is really cool. So that'll be DPS Varshan versus tank Varshan.
But we all know the most important part of this shot, right?
Is Ferdiad.
Yeah, your boy's back.
Yeah, Ferdiad, Kukulin's boyfriend, of course.
Spears up butts and all that.
Yeah, spears up butts. I was just about to say a whole myth that's, my opinion, an allegory for anal sex, but that's okay. Yeah. Ferdiad here with a spear and a Dullahan, which is just, you know, a void scent. I'm assuming it's going to be a powerful one, but it's interesting, really interesting that Ferdiad's here. I suppose he's kind of mercenary, right? You know, he switches masters as fast as he can.
Well, the other interesting thing, too, is if you look at him, we're fighting the Dullahan, but, like, he's just kind of sitting there looking at it. It's almost like he's not attacking us, or maybe might even be on our side.
He might be, like, charging up an ability or something.
Could be.
Although we fought him enough, right? Maybe it's time that he fights on our side. I'm really excited to see the inside of these structures on Tri. I think that'll tell us a lot about the society that was once here.
Speaking of, in the next shot, we also get the third version of Varshan, which is the Healer Varshan. You can see, if you look at his staff, it's now changed from a glaive to like a staff. But we also get a lot of the interior of Troy as well.
That almost looks like a bill hook to me. But yeah, it could be a staff, yeah.
I mean, but why change it from the glaive?
Yeah, you're right. There's no point,
you know,
if he's just a DPS.
And also, if we're the paladin in the foreground, Yustola is clearly the black mage, and
Estinian's the DPS.
Estinian's the DPS. He would have to be the healer.
What do you think this big rift is? Probably a boss, right? That's emerging.
Yeah,
or something like that.
Yeah, it has to be, right? Although, like, is it a shroud that's blocking off the thing, or is it a portal, a rift into a different area?
Yeah, it could be that once we kill all the bosses, that rift falls or something like that. Or if we kill a trash mob pack, then that rift falls.
That'd be a cool idea. Speaking of the legacy of Void Scent, well, more the legacy of Mach, we get Catchy. We get Kate Sith.
Yeah, we get Catchy. We get the Red Bills.
So that's going to be part of Tatara's grand endeavor.
If we are talking to these people, if we get the Null Stone, that's how we control the Ariak.
Oh, that's very, very interesting. So we got more information on this, though. My understanding is that this is Tatara's grand endeavor.
But they could also just show up in this for a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense.
They've got the characters up in the run of their heads, and perhaps even this is how. Perhaps it just spins off the MSQ. We go to meet them, get the Void Stone, get the Null Stone. Sorry,
I just had a thought though about the Null Stone. It's kind of useless in the 13th though, because the main purpose of the Null Stone is to avoid null packs and to return the Void into the 13th.
It is,
Like,
but
that's its
I
power.
wonder if perhaps there will be some more utility because we don't know what it does in the 13th. I don't think the Maki ever took it to. I don't think they ever went personally. I'm not ready to make that session actually, but you know.
I
What
got
mean.
another problem though, by the way. That would require that people have to play Shadows of Armagh, and not only they're literally
Yeah.
not requiring, and they're omitting Warring Triad and the role quest from Shadowbringers. And I don't know. My guess is the way they're going to deal with that is just by having Anukel High and Sylvie be a side quest thing you can do. But like otherwise, I have no like.
I really feel like this story is going to benefit. My recommendation to anyone is please play the Shadows of Max story before you go into this, even if it's not essential. Obviously, it isn't, but you will gain so much more from it having played it.
I would even say definitely you should absolutely play Warring Triad. You should absolutely play Shadows over Mach, and you should absolutely do all the Shadowbringer role quests. I mean, you should do all three of those things for multiple reasons. But if you have not done them and you're at 6.2, you should definitely do them.
Yes, yeah.
Here's the thing: none of them are particularly hard,
No.
and you will be very, very well rewarded for it in the long run, and not just in like general lore knowledge, but also like characterization and stuff. I feel like the easiest microcosm I can use to explain it is it's like playing Omega before going to Ultima Thule. It's like, yeah, Ultima Thule works if you haven't played Omega, but boy, is it a lot more resonant with the dragons and the Omicrons if you have.
It works, but it's and I don't like to use any negative terms to describe this game that I love, but it's not nearly as compelling.
No, it's more hollow because it's not that it's incoherent, but the resonance is lost.
It goes from here's this cool story that we've experienced to cool robots, and cool robots are cool. I like cool robots, but you know there's more depth that you could have there.
Yeah, and the fact that it starts with
right
dragons and ends with them too. So moving on, we get the Golbez walking. And then he says, then go and impress upon these interlopers the futility of defiance. Well, assume it's him. Again, we're seeing him walk, but it's very important that this could, for all we know, this is actually La Habrea in the raid, and they, for some reason,
yeah.
have no voice. I doubt it. I definitely think it's MSQ, partially because they don't really voice the raids, but the point being that this could be a separate character, but I do think the impression I could take is that it's definitely Golbez.
So I'm pretty confident that at 221, this figure that we're fighting is the succubus pact Voidsent that we see Scarmiglione kill.
Yes, but the other interesting thing about it to me is that if you look, that's the same room from before. You can see like a Scarmiglione in like an energy version over off to the left.
Yeah.
This is the same room our friend was fighting in before, and our friend is missing at this point.
Yes, Varshan's over there with his spear.
Yeah, but our mysterious and this person also has like coattails. I mean, the thing is, she doesn't have a scythe, so like there's that element takes away from it. But it is interesting that she's missing at this point.
Yeah, but this is definitely the same model because it's got that sort of weird Geiger-esque tail at the back of its head that I noticed on the other one, and it's got the coattails that are very similar. I'm pretty, and the weird thing around its head, I'm pretty confident this is the same model or very, very similar.
Different helm. So I think this goes along with my idea that I think this is either the queen of or like part of the guard. Like there was like a guards group of Troya or something, and that they became Voidsent, except for this one didn't. Our new mysterious friend didn't. I think it's
what's interesting to me is that the statues of the gods that we see in this room are all masculine.
That's very true.
And in fairly generic fantasy sort of Western armor. With a little Final Fantasy twist.
We get her coming in with her blue powers, which is actually interesting if you think about it, because those are not necessarily packed powers. She doesn't have a packed Voidsent in any apparent way.
Well, I wonder if she is, a scythe-wielding individual who uses void powers, but perhaps not what we consider a reaper. Perhaps she doesn't need packed powers. Right? She lives in the void. She might not even need a pact to do what we can do.
I think that's a very safe supposition.
She kills this weird Biblos thing, like the like the thing that comes out of the book in Google, which is also a Voidsent.
So she destroys that, and then we see us confronting Xenos's Voidsent Pact member. And again, I would point out that if you look at his scythe and you look at her scythe, they are seemingly identical.
Yeah, they are at the very least very similar. It's always awkward when you meet your ex-boyfriend's friends. When you're out in the void. But no, yeah. So this is interesting, right? Obviously, we knew that Xenos's pact companion is going to be or this Voidsent is going to be a prominent part of this storyline. We've seen them many times. But is it this figure? Certainly, the scythe seems to in sort of draw a link. Is it someone of just of a similar theming? I think there's a lot of stuff that will be revealed the moment we learn exactly the identity of who this Voidsent will be.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much potentially to be able to learn from them as well, just from, I mean, honestly, even their time with Xenos. Do you think, I mean, like now that like there's multiple identities this person thing could have. I mean, it could have none. It could be. I'm still wondering if we ever come across the 13th version of the Warrior of Light, and I wonder. There's a metric fuck ton of candidates, plus all the candidates that we don't even know about yet, and I wonder if
Right.
that'll ever even be an element. I mean, because they already played that out with Ardbert, but at the same time, we've seen them sometimes be conventional with unconventional choices and be like, no, we have this concept. Let's use this concept.
Has it ever been 100% deconfirmed that it's not Unukalkai?
No, like that
No.
it could be. The only issue with it being Unukalkai is that like we interact and engage with Endwalker and that we never see like anything like happen.
Yeah, that's true.
But like we fought Ardbert,
yeah,
and nothing happened.
right.
So
it's possible that we do it. It would be absolutely hilarious if Xenos found a shard of us to make him to his friend.
well, and that's the thing is I feel like there's some like beautiful, not even irony really there, but like it fits in so well that like I kind of like that.
Yeah, no, I see what you're coming. I see where you're coming.
But again, I really can't tell if me thinking that is you know that fan thing you do where you try to make everything interconnected when it's better if maybe not everything is hyper interconnected. I'm more positive as a interesting possibility more so than this is the train I'm riding on.
Well, I think it would be very funny.
Yeah, it would definitely be very, very, very funny. So shall we move on to the pandemonium stuff?
Shall see my wish fulfilled. Let's seep sorrow into your heart. Rest eternal in the dark depths of this prison.
Oh, first off, I just want to say, because we forgot to say it earlier, what a fucking banger ass song! And my assumption is that's the P8 music.
Yeah, probably.
So there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, so we've got our big guy, big lizard man.
No, wait, gets better. You know what that is?
What is that?
That, my friend, is the proto carbuncle.
Oh yes, of course it is. Yes. Yes.
That is the prototype carbuncle. And what I love is if you look, the crystal on its head is a horn, which harkens it back also to like the summoner. So like there's a lot, like it's lovely, and also terrifying.
Yeah, of course. It wasn't so clear in this picture, but yeah, I see it now. And behind that, of course, are a bunch of ported assets from Amdapor City. The mushrooms, which
God, they're so good at reusing.
Oh yeah, it looks great. Yeah, it looks really good.
Well, just like the amount of time that they save by like trying to reuse assets, especially assets where you don't see them a whole bunch. So we also then have the next fight, which is a giant tree, and this is actually going to get into a conversation we have about the poster in a little bit. I think all the elements on the poster are directly tied into some of the fights we're going to be having.
Yeah.
And you can see some of the also things floating up on the side look remarkably like the Beharits from Berserk, which we know the dev team has a fondness for.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've said this before, I'm sure, but show me a piece of media that isn't influenced by Berserk.
True.
Yeah. The obviously at least one of them very much resembles that, and I think it would be rash to surmise no link. Again, in inspiration.
Well, and especially when you think about, I think like Pandemonium as a whole, and especially it's seeming how Abyssos is seeming to be, is very very, there's aspects of the eldritch, there are aspects of even just like the world design of like the inconsistency of space, and I think there's a bunch of like touches of that are filtering in here. I mean, you're having the many-eyed, many mouths, things that you can't even necessarily make sense of, like, is that even a tree?
Right. Yeah. So just to expand on Beherits, that they're an object from Berserk. They're essentially a key to another world. So I wonder if there's anything to be found there.
I definitely hope so. The other thing about the tree is that you can see what seems like a woman, I'm assuming an ancient, like fused into it. And what I think is this is similar to Hesperos. What are they called? The Hemios?
Yeah.
Hemios?
The woman that we see, right?
Yeah, I'm wondering if they're what happens is that they are fused with one of the creations, just like of that it was stuck in Abyssos, just like how Hesperos fused himself with the vampire.
I think that's definitely possible. The first thing that came to mind, when I saw this was it's a giant tree monster with a beautiful woman phased into it. It's giving Warring Triad.
Oh, that's a really interesting point.
Sephiroth and Sophia, of course. Now, I don't think that's intentional because Sephiroth is probably a Zem, sort of inspired by a Zem, whereas Sophia, God knows. But
I mean, I feel like Sophia is just inspired by a desire for balance, and then like it's also quite possible that many entities may be like very tangentially rooted in something, but also could just be like rooted in basic desires. I mean, like you have things like Garuda. I mean, it kind of makes more sense with the Ixalian, but you have Lakshmi, whereas the Ananta, are byproducts of Lamia.
Yeah.
You then think about, but so like Lakshmi is not really rooted in anything Allegan or anything that would have been.
Well, I mean, the mother goddess is enjoying imagery regardless of what culture you're from, basically. But this big tree's pretty cool. It's summoning zoos, ZUs, the birds, which doesn't really have a huge lore impact, but I think that's cool.
Seems like a fun fight.
It seems like a pretty fun fight. We got some meteor dropping stuff going on.
Yeah, I gotta love Final Fantasy XIV loves its demonic trees.
It does. It's got big red eyes. It's an interesting design. I'd love to learn the etymology behind that so I can really dig into it.
Well, speaking of names, we see La Habrea staring at his convocation stone. But interestingly, his convocation stone is a different color.
Yeah, so I wonder if my theory that the La Habrea that we see here is not the La Habrea that we end up dealing with in our time, that he's succeeded by one of the NPCs that we're interacting with. I wonder if that will come true.
Yeah, and I think I've stated this many places out, but that's been my theory with Eric Thonios being the La Habrea of our time since for forever, and I think that makes sense. It also explains a long running question I've had, which is, well, why is when you ascend someone with a convocation stone, why aren't they like remembering that? Why don't they have the memories of all of the people of the seat? If these are like the convocation stone of the seat, and this would imply that each time a new member is raised to that seat of the convocation, they get a fresh stone, which makes it all make a lot more sense.
It makes it a whole lot more humane.
Yeah. Well, and also speaking on your point about like one of the characters we know, seeing as one of our characters is just straight up is Elidibus, Themis is Elidibus. I mean, that lowers the amount of candidates we have for
yeah, Themis is almost certainly Elidibus. But I like to hedge my bets. I've been wrong in these videos before many times.
They literally have him talking on the seat of Elpis at the end of 6.0 with Elidibus's voice. Like, what?
Yes, I know. Listen, I like to just be careful. I say that, and then I came out with saying that Silky was Nanamo's persona. So I don't know why I'm pretending to play it safe.
Because me and you, we desperately try to be like relatively conservative, not just speculate wildly, speculate responsibly, but then we have these ideas and we can't let them go.
Yeah. So obviously, some people are very thirsty about La Habrea. That's all I'll say first, but yes.
Oh, everyone, I mean, people have their mommy stuff, so of course they have their, daddy or grandpappy stuff.
Uh-huh.
So, Speaking of Ericthonios, we have him seeming like he's about to go seal away someone else, because this is the animation he uses when he's sealing away things. I can't quite tell which arena it is, though. Because there's ground beneath him. I don't think it's the tree or the carbuncle. I think it must be P7 or P8.
It could be P7 or P8, yeah. Probably P7, right? Maybe that would be my guess.
Probably, but with how little we get, maybe that's them really trying to tease P8.
It could be. Oh, well, actually, yeah, the woman that we see with the Ascian mask on is in the same arena that he is when he's trying to seal.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm going to touch on that in a second, but we see the outside of what I think is Abyssos, because I think like the layers within space are supposed to be like stacked within each other, because it's not
Euclidean.
Yeah, it's definitely not Euclidean space, but I was also thinking it's not Asphodelos. Yeah.
I'm assuming that they'll just be color swaps of each other, right? Vaguely, like there'll be similar structures with slightly changed stuff, and then a different theming color for each lobby. The metal behind this woman is extremely high definition.
Yes, I hope that they continue to be using textures that are more on this. I really wonder is if like they're using some of that, they're testing some stuff for some of the graphics changes.
Yeah, this game's beautiful, but the textures aren't always necessarily actually super high def. Like
They're sometimes standard def. They're actually often standard definition.
They are
painfully so.
Sometimes they're low definition even.
Yeah. But this, I'm assuming this is one of the wardens of Abyssos.
Yeah,
that is probably under the sway of whether it be La Habrea or whoever's whoever's causing what's going on here. But it looks like we see Themis it may not be the same space because you can't really see behind, but you can see the Warrior of Light behind them. We see that what looks like the warden about to probably combine with something or do something because well, I don't know, because when we see the fight in a second with the orange hair, her hair doesn't seem orange. She's like more of like a brown haired and also you don't see the piping in the background. So I think that piping, I think that's her about to turn into the tree, and that's probably like P6, and then this one with the orange hair coming up is P7.
It's possible. It's possible. I did also think this looks a whole lot like a mix between her and Ericthonios.
Oh, interesting.
And it's got wings behind it, like most Ascian fusions have.
Well, the other interesting thing is you see the snake.
Right.
And again,
two snakes. One on the other side too.
So one of the reasons that's interesting to me is because if you look at the poster, you will notice that there is an element of the tree, there's the element of the eldritch, and there's an element of the snake, as well as what is a raven or a crow. I'm not very good at identifying them. So I'm wondering if the raven or the crow or so, like, I'm trying to figure out what the carbuncle is supposed to be represented by. But either way, the poster seems to have each battle represented. Mm-hmm. And I think that P8 is going to be really eldritch if that holds true.
Probably. I do wonder if this is an Ascian prime of Ericthonios and this woman, but probably unwillingly on Ericthonios' side. Pet theory, probably wrong, but it looks a lot like a fusion between them.
My rationalization is to go with another warder who's maybe changed themselves to look more like La Habrea because of their obsession with him or something. But yeah, I mean, wild speculation there. We then see the beginning of the carbuncle fight.
Yeah, better view of the carbuncle.
Actually, I don't think it's the beginning of the carbuncle fight because the players are all standing around and they're like having a paused imagery animation around them. So I think this is a carbuncle attack or something, or like a mid-phase transition.
Yeah, I think you probably have to break out of it or something like that. It's kind of like jump into the middle. You have to break out and go somewhere. A grody looking arena.
And then we have Old Man La Habrea in the carbuncle arena. And what's interesting is he crushes his seat of office.
Yeah.
Very interesting what he's about to do there.
Right, yeah. He's looking pretty crazy in the in the poster, right?
Well, we'll talk about the poster in 1 second. The final thing I want to talk about with the trailer before the poster stuff is there's the dialogue that we get over this section. The three lines we have is... rest eternal in the darkness of this prison. We also have let seep sorrow into your heart, and I will have my wish fulfilled, basically. And I assume those are Golbez.
The prison one would make sense to be La Habrea, though, right?
It would, but the thing is that it's unless there's all of a sudden going to start voicing cutscenes for raids.
I wouldn't be hugely surprised, but yeah, it's true. It's true that it's not been the case so far.
Yeah, look, I'd gladly take it, but it would just like, you know what it could be if he's P8. If like fighting a version of him or fighting whoever's talking is P8, some raid fights can be voiced, so that can explain
that's true. So something that's interesting is that when he crushes his mask, his sigil, he does so. That's where we see the carbuncle stood before the. It's a different arena than the one that we see him jumping down at us at. So, but you see pipes in this arena behind La Habrea. So I'm assuming that we're going to be smashed through the earth down into this drainage area where we fight the carbuncle afterwards. Maybe second phase.
I would also point out to P1, like when Erichthonios transforms the entire stadium, like that also is possible. Because we see that happen in P1. We see that happen in... I mean, like, also if you do the Savages, too, that happen, like P4S and stuff. So,
yeah.
There's a couple ways that could go. So, shall we finish things off by talking about the poster real quick?
Yeah, we can do.
So, I guess, importantly, one thing that the trailer does here is it specifically flashes from La Habrea to Insane La Habrea. Now, this Insane La Habrea is red-haired and not old compared to this La Habrea we know. La Habrea we see.
Is it red-haired or is it red lighting?
That's a good point. However, I would say he doesn't have the beard. He doesn't have he doesn't seem grizzled. It definitely to me strikes me as this is supposed to be a younger version. The other interesting thing is if you look at them, if you look at the actual poster, you can see that one has that they're perfectly mirrored in terms of literally one small eye, one wide eye, one small eye, one wide. Like it's literally the same face almost.
But have you noticed that he has a non-convocation mask on his robe?
Yes, I have. And so that's what's the question is. And the question is that because this is someone else trying to become like La Habrea because of obsession? Because we know Hesperos was obsessed. Is it representative of La Habrea at an earlier time in his life? Yeah, it's just not clear. But to go back to my...
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is also go back to the poster and like the elements of the bosses and stuff is you see the snake, right? Which could be like that, what we think is maybe something like P7. You see the many-eyed monstrosity. You see the nature tree element stuff. You also see the tentacles in the raven. Now, how the raven could potentially play, like, I don't know. I don't see any element that I'm like, yes, carbuncle, unless all of a sudden the carbuncle is going to get tentacles in phase 2, which...
Yeah, so there's a whole lot of mystery in this poster. I wonder if perhaps the Raven is, not necessarily linked to a boss as much as it is La Habrea. He seems like a raveny dude. It's interesting that Red La Habrea person is wrapped in chains.
Yes. Well, but the chains are also wrapped around the wrist of older La Habrea too.
Also true.
It's going to be very interesting to see. We also see what seems like a female figure standing in the light of the doorway, and I think we're assuming that's Athena.
Yes,
I think that's the safest assumption. It's also interesting to me that they chose to go with the raid for the poster. I mean, it's not like like 5.1 they chose to go with like the near for the poster mainly. So it's not like it's unheard of or rare or anything, but it is. It makes me wonder if part of the reason is that there were actually fewer spoilers to create a poster out of the raid than there was out of the MSQ.
Yeah, well, I wonder if perhaps this top section is in fact an allusion to the MSQ. I wonder if that's MSQ content.
I think that's Abyssos.
Yeah, it could be.
Because if you go back and look at the trailer when we see the exterior of Abyssos, that's basically what you see.
It's very similar, yeah. I've just noticed that. So I looked for a HD version of the poster and just clicked on it. The first one I saw. I've just noticed that it's an altered one that said "buried these nuts in your mouth" instead of "buried memories." So that's
okay. Wait, you need to send me that and put it because I have to make sure that's in the video.
Okay, all right, we'll send it to you.
Wow. I don't know where to go with that, and I don't know that I have that much else to say.
No, I don't know if I do much either.
Well, I've been Elliot Forcheron.
I've been Iniri.
And we'll see you guys in 6.2, which we will. I'm sure we will all have a wonderful time playing.
Yeah, I definitely think so. It's they've not let me down yet.
Well, cheers all.
Cheers all.
This content was brought to you by the Eorzean Archives. If you enjoyed this video, help us please the 12 by leaving a like and subscribing for new content every Thursday. and comment down below with any topic you'd like to see our archons cover in the future. For even more content, discussion, and exclusives, please check out our Discord and consider supporting us on Patreon.